Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Yesshift, and this is another Steven's Vinyl Adventures episode. So, on this episode, it is October 6th, 2025, and it is the birthday of Tom Brislin, who was the keyboardist for the Yes Symphonic Tour and even appeared at the Yes Fan Fest back in 2018. And in recent years, he's been the keyboardist of Kansas. So on this episode, I am talking about their album from 2020, The Absence of Presence. And this is also the most recent Kansas studio album, from what I can tell. I've listened to this before, but I ordered it on vinyl recently and got around to listening to it on that format. So I'll be talking about that. But first, just real quick, I know that there are set lists out there for the Yes Tour that has just started this past week. I'm not going to talk about that set list in this video. The set list details are out there if people want to check them out, but if anything, I'll touch on them toward the end of the next news desk edition. It'll be at the very end so that if people don't want spoilers, they can just wait until before that moment, and I'll give a warning, and they could just dip out until they see the show for themselves. And so, yeah, the next news desk edition here on Yesshift, I'm planning on doing that Monday, October 13th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time. I'm going to stick to that. I know it was a little late coming on here for this particular broadcast. I had to adjust some things on my end. But yeah, that's the plan. And also, I'm not sure if I'll be continuing this weekly streak of doing these vinyl adventures episodes. I know it's like a 7-week streak, which has been really fun, but I think I'm going to dial it back a little bit just because of how busy things are. But I do have something I'm planning on talking about in November, at least, for a vinyl adventures segment. So, there'll still be some of these here and then. But today there's also a bit of Rush news, something I did not expect on a Monday. And so I'll talk about that later in this video. I very well could just wait until the next news thing, but this news was just so huge that I got to say something about it. So first I'll talk about this Kansas album, and then I'll touch on all that. So feel free to comment your thoughts on Kansas, The Absence of Presence, and on Rush and their announced Reformation. All right, so my history with Kansas, probably lots of people can relate. You hear the songs, their most popular songs, such as Carry On Wayward Son. I heard that in the Adam Sandler movie Happy Gilmore. I don't know if I touched on that when I talked about Styx last week, but how Styx was kind of touched on in a couple Adam Sandler movies, and that's another example of one of these bands I sort of hear in an Adam Sandler movie. That's wow. And there was also a South Park episode, the Guitar Hero one, where that same song was played. Dust in the Wind, I heard in an episode of The Simpsons. So I'd heard a couple of these hits here and there. At some point of no return, I think, was in a commercial where there was a guy in a car. I don't remember if that was before or after I started actually listening to Kansas. But yeah, to refresh people's memories, 2008 to 2009 is when I started listening to the prog rock giants, and then in mid 2009 I branched out a little bit further, looking into some of these other bands that are maybe closer to like stadium rock, that type of genre, a bit more mainstream, so like Kansas, Journey, Styx. And I don't think I got past their Monolith album. I think at that time I got just before Monolith and have since listened to that album. But beyond that era, I don't think I've listened to any albums beyond like past Monolith, apart from the absence of Presence, which I listened to within these last few years, as we've talked about Tom Brislin and what he's been up to on this show. We had Tom for an interview, I think 3 years ago now, something like that, or maybe it was 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. It's somewhere in our archives. You can find it pretty easily. We actually reposted it today on Facebook. All right, so this album, instead of showing the physical product, like holding it up to the camera, I'm gonna do something different here. I took pictures this time. I feel like it's more practical that way, and I won't have to worry about some of the movement and overlap with the visual effects or anything. So this right here is I believe this is the booklet. You got that reflection of the shine there, which is kind of fitting because you get reflection mentioned in the lyrics here and there. And there's a backside of the booklet which has the lyrics for a few of the songs. And I have the inside of it somewhere around here. Let me just go ahead and find it. I do have it here. Okay, yeah, it's one of these files. So I'll go ahead and screen share that. Yeah, so I really like this layout where they have the artwork and also the lyrics. Again, when it comes to vinyl records, it's all about presentation. You want people to be able to admire the art, but also know what's being sung. So yeah, on the inside you have side 1 on one page, side 2 on another, and the back side is side 3. So I really like that. I really dig the blue and purple colors on this. And what else have I got here in these photos? I have the cover art right here. There's a backside of it. Get the producer there. Yeah, produced by Zach Rizvi. And then I scrolling down to these other photos. And if you open the gatefold, you get to see all this here. You get the credits, you get the length, the runtime for each of these tracks. I was really surprised that the track listing wasn't on the back of this whole thing. You have to open it to see the tracks or look at the middle of the records themselves. So for side 1, you have The Absence of Presence, Throwing Mountains, Jets Overhead. Side 2, you have Propulsion 1, Memories Down the Line, Circus Evolution. And for side 3, you have Animals on the Roof, Never, and the Song the River Sang. I was a bit surprised that this was, 2 LPs with 3 of the sides having music on them and the 4th side being just, extra thing. You kind of it's impossible to have a 3rd side without having a back side to it. But obviously you can't play music on the 4th side since there's nothing on it. I'll show those in a moment, but I'm just looking at the runtimes of these. So Absence of Presence is almost 8.5 minutes. Throwing Mountains is almost 6.5. Jets Overhead is almost 5.5. So you have about around 20 minutes there. And then for side 2, you got a 2-minute track, a 4.5-minute track, and a almost 5.5-minute track. So right there, that's 12 minutes of music, more or less. So one might wonder why not put Propulsion 1 and maybe Memories Down the Line toward the end of side one. But I think the reasoning for that is Propulsion 1 really does feel like the beginning of a new thing. Like the way it begins, it feels like it should be the intro to an album or a side. So I can see the reasoning of splitting those. Side 3 has a 5-minute track. Like each of those tracks on there are 5 minutes, so 15 minutes. So this very well could have been a 2-side record, like just one LP. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of wonder if maybe they could have rearranged the tracks so that there's less material used for these. And again, someone more knowledgeable about LPs might be able to tell me, oh, well, actually, they had to do this for this reason. And, I welcome that. It's just a little odd thing that I noticed. But yeah, so this, of course, shows the credits and the band members. You've got Tom Brislin on keyboards, vocals, and lead vocals on the closing track, the song The River Sang. Got Phil Ehart on drums. Dad actually interviewed him over at Drum Talk TV about 3 years ago, I believe. Billy Greer on bass and vocals. Ronnie Platt on lead vocals. And David Ragsdale on violin. And Zach Rizvi on electric guitar, vocals, and Richard Williams on electric guitar and acoustic guitar. Yeah, so we also got the special thanks, and yeah, they're very extensive. We list some companies there. So and I like that they put these black and white photos of each of the members. They look very professionally done here. So let's see the other photos I have here, and then talk a bit more about the music. These might be out of order. So that's side 1. I believe this is side 2. Yeah, I'm showing these come in these white sleeves, these records, and you could see the middle part like through the little preview thing there. I believe this is the side 3 photo, and this is the back side. And I'll show these outside of their sleeves. Just give me a sec. But yeah, I guess first before I do that, I want to talk about the music. I really love how it really does start out with a bang. The absence of presence. It begins with these amazing, beautiful violins. Sorry, I'm just checking something. The violins are probably, to my ears, most prominent on side 1. They are very present on those first 3 tracks. And I think there's a similar vocal melody in a few of the lyrics in Absence of Presence that sort of echo what's to come in Throwing Mountains. Like you got Throwing Mountains, that melody I feel like is an echo of a bit of what we hear on the Absence of Presence. Throwing Mountains might be the most catchy song on here, I would say. And so side 1 feels very much like those 3 tracks. They kind of feel like a unit, And side 2, you got that instrumental, which is Propulsion 1, which leads into Memories Down the Line, a more moody, emotional, ballady type of track, but it might potentially be my favorite track. I know Dad and I have talked about, ballads versus bombastic songs, but I admit I get really into some of the songs that have more ballady moments. And then you get Circus of Illusion, which sort of brings us back into that more bombastic side. And side 3, you got Animals on the Roof, which was another rocking one. Never has a bit more of that ballady flavor. And then the song The River Sang, I think, ends the album with a bang, maybe even an abrupt one toward the end. Like the ending, everything is escalating and then it just sort of ends. I do kind of wonder if maybe a different ending could have been made, but who am I to say like what these guys should have done? This is the record that they worked on, that they, clearly they put a lot of work and passion into this. So I think that's really amazing. So I'll go ahead and show you how the records, the LPs look outside of the sleeves. Is this side one? I think it is. Let me just share that window. Yeah, the text looks tiny the way that I'm looking at it, but yeah, I'll show you all 4 of these. So stop sharing that, show you this other one. There you go. I really like the way there are a couple different colors that you could order this album in. I went with a blue. I think the other one was like, it might have been white or transparent or something like that. But yeah, I just am more into the blue for this particular one. It just fits the album artwork very nicely. So I gravitate toward that. And on these are so new and shiny that you can see my reflection as I was taking the pictures of them. The my silhouette, I guess, since it's just all dark blue. So I'll go ahead and show you this one. Is this it? Or let me make sure. Okay, so yeah, so that one there. And then I'll show you the one that doesn't have music on it, but still has these symbols, which are nice to put on there just so that there is something there. There you go. So yeah, I was trying to figure out, these kind of look like bubbles. Like it very much has an oceanic feel, so maybe that's what they were going for. I think it's nice looking, but again, I do wonder if they could have crafted this album in a way where it could have taken up only 2 sides, as cool as that looks. But yeah, as far as Tom Brislin's credits, he co-wrote the lyrics on Absence of Presence and Throwing Mountains, along with Phil Ehart. And on Jets Overhead, he wrote all the lyrics to that. Propulsion, he wrote the music for that. That's the instrumental. Memories Down the Line, he wrote all the music and the lyrics, according to this. Circus of Illusion, not to be confused with Circus of Heaven, is one where he does not have credits there. That one was Ronnie Platt with the lyrics and Zach Risby, with the music. And then Animals on the Roof, he's back co-writing the lyrics with Phil Ehart, and the music is by Zach. On Never, he doesn't have a credit on there. It's Ronnie and Phil on the lyrics and Zach on the music. And then the song The River Sang, the music and the lyrics are all from Tom. And his playing, and the piano sound, it's just really beautiful on this album. He's been a fantastic addition to this band, been with them now for at least 5 years, maybe a little longer. And Kansas are still playing now. I did see that recently, and we talked about this on the Drum Talk TV news desk report. There was a reunion of sorts that included like original members of the band. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this was in Bonner Springs, Kansas, the state, which very fitting. This was on September 26th. The current lineup of Kansas, including Rich Williams, was accompanied by Kerry Livgren, Dave Hope, and Phil Ehart. So that's really cool. And, you have these band members who, even if they're not playing with the band or playing as much, they're still very active in the Kansas organization. Feels very much like, that family, that lineage. These people aren't in this band out of nowhere. But I do wonder if the band sometimes gets some of those comments that you see on some Yes posts where there were some posts for Yes's Fragile tour, this current one, Fragile 2025, and the next 2026 tour dates. And you have people following the band's page, and when it shows a picture or video of the members, you still have people who follow the Yes page saying who, and it's like, what's your deal? If you're following the band page and you have to ask who are the band members now, then you're either just trying to stir stuff or you just don't know how to Google who's in the band now, and it's just really annoying. And I do wonder if other bands maybe encounter that as well in their comments. I don't look at the Kansas comment sections or forums all that much, so I have no idea if there's a similar thing going on there. But with rock bands being what they are, I kind of wouldn't be surprised. But I've seen Kansas, 2 years ago, I think it was, when I saw them. They were amazing. Their sound was big and huge, and they all work together really well. Like, the band is really keeping the flame alive, and they still have some tour dates coming up. If you go to kansasband.com and go to tour dates, I'm just glancing at this. Yeah, their next show is on the 8th over at Knoxville, Tennessee. They got some East Coast stuff going on. October, November. Oh, November they're touring, or they have at least a couple shows with Blue Oyster Cult. So I think Richie Castellano from John Anderson and the Bangakes might be involved at those shows. Yeah, they got more in December as well. I see that they're in Ventura, California on December 3rd. I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it to that show though. And then they're on Las Vegas December 5th. See, they got a few other places, Texas. Then January they're continuing Florida. And then they're back on a few East Coast places in February. So yeah, they're pretty busy. And I've not read too much about, I haven't seen any news on whether they've said anything about any subsequent studio album, but I would be very curious if they ever do have the time to make another one, what that would sound like. Maybe it would be a continuation of this sort of thing with the absence of presence. Yeah, who knows? I do wonder if maybe they want to, but there's a lot of touring. So yeah, I really don't know. I'm kind of out of the loop as far as Kansas news that goes that in depth about future plans. But I do see the posts about, who's subbing for whom and all that stuff. And yeah, great to see that Kansas is still very much alive. So yeah, but speaking of reunions and what have you, I know that was like maybe several minutes ago when I mentioned the Bonner Springs thing. Like I said, I woke up to news today, and this is probably one of the biggest forms of music news I've woken up to. One of the biggest ones that I can remember is when From a Page was announced. Another one was the Fly From Here Return Trip Deluxe release, like being briefly excited that maybe they'll also include the Benwell stuff, and then read more into it and be like, oh, it's just the Return Trip again. But this one happened today, really excited me. It was more on the exciting end of the spectrum, the news that Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson of Rush are having the Rush 50 something tour next year in summer of 2026. And their drummer is going to be Annika Niles, whom Dad has interviewed on Drum Talk TV a couple times. She's a really good drummer. And if I'm not mistaken, has also drummed with Jeff Beck. Yeah, she has. Yeah, that was within the last few years, at least. And, you have this video of Geddy and Alex talking about coming back together as Rush and, talking about Neil and saying that he's irreplaceable. And also saying that, in terms of going forward again, Rush hasn't toured in about 10 years, if I remember correctly. And Neil Peart passed away back in early 2020. And that was a huge thing. Neil, such a huge part of Rush's history. He was a drummer, but also a lyricist, and just so integral to the Rush DNA. Their debut album was the only one where he wasn't the drummer. The one with John Rutsey, is also no longer with us. But I feel like Geddy and Alex going forward with this Rush tour, I don't think they're doing it to, disrespect the Rush legacy or Neil or anything like that. I really believe they put a lot of thought into this. And hey, they're musicians. They want to play music, so maybe I guess one could argue that they could have just toured as Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, but we all know that the Rush name is just, it draws a lot of people, especially those who don't know who the band members are. And those people do exist. There are people who know about Rush but don't know who the members are. In fact, I do remember one time talking with someone who seemed like he knew all the Rush albums, but then couldn't remember which band member had passed away. It was really strange. So I understand using the band name, and even when Geddy had his book tour for his memoir a couple years ago, I did wonder even back then if this was potentially a test to see how many people will turn up, arrive at these venues for at least one person from Rush. But yeah, I have no issue with them continuing the name. I think they're going to do a great job honoring the material, honoring Neil and all that. And interestingly, in the video, they also mentioned there might end up being a keyboard player. They haven't said whom. And, Dad and I were sort of speculating. He was going through possibilities from like the prog rock sphere. And I thought, maybe it's going to be someone that isn't as widely known, potentially. So I'm very curious to see who the keyboard player will be. I think that's a nice choice because it relieves some of the duties from Geddy, although I did read somewhere that he'll still play keyboards in certain moments. I think Tom Sawyer will be one of those where he does play keys. And I think making this a quartet kind of helps with that perception that they're not replacing the classic trio that we've known for decades. So I think this will be an interesting configuration for this Rush Reformation. I'm kind of making like a mental comparison to Beat, how that has a couple King Crimson members and a couple other people who haven't been in King Crimson, but they use a different name, of course, Beat. But yeah, I'm excited about this. I see that they're in Los Angeles for a couple shows in June. What other places are they going to? Yeah, they had like this visual that had the traffic light and it's green, so that feels very on brand for Rush. They're also in Fort Worth for a couple dates in June, Mexico City, Chicago for a couple dates in July, and then New York City for a couple July dates. And then in August, they have a couple Toronto dates, and September, Cleveland, Ohio. So this is kind of seems like a smaller scale tour, not quite extensive as the world tours, but that they've done in the past. But hey, you know, they're at the age that they are now, so really got to pace themselves. It's understandable. And yeah, I'm really curious. So, you know, with Rush, their set lists are very diverse. They were always good at incorporating the classics, but also the newer material and the different eras. So I really am curious to see how they diversify the set list for this upcoming tour. And you know, you also can't help but wonder, are they also going to make a new Rush album of new music as well after this? I guess we'll see. You know, they're probably focusing more on the tour, and then after that, they'll see what happens. Maybe they want to see what the reception is like first. But yeah, new Rush music. I mean, it's tough to think about because Neil did the vast majority of those lyrics. So it's like, how different would a Rush album be without that component? I mean, we've seen Alex and Getty on their own solo things, but yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with the tour first, and then whatever comes next. So yeah, that's a lot of prog rock stuff to talk about for this episode. Like I said, the next Yesshift News Desk edition will be October 13th. I'm going to shoot for noon Pacific. I figured wait until then. You know, there is some other Yes and related news that's been coming out lately. I saw that Oliver Wakeman had a hospital stay for a little bit, but thankfully he's recovering. So wishing him well. But yeah, there's a lot of Yes and Yes related music news. And also, Prague Stock is happening this coming weekend, October 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. I've bought my tickets to a few of those live streams, so I'm not going to be able to watch all the bands that are live streaming from there, but I'll get to see at least a fraction of the whole thing, so I'll be ready to talk about that on the news desk. But yeah, so much music, so much awesome stuff. And again, happy birthday to Tom Brislin. Even though he was in Yes for a short time, you know, not as an official member then, but then retroactively listed as a member on yesworld.com later on. He went on to do all this awesome stuff with Kansas and Renaissance and people from Styx. It's, yeah, what a career. But yeah, that's it for now. You can follow us at Yesshift on Facebook and YouTube, and write to us via yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and see you all soon. Bye.